All right. Thank you, Carrie. Let's go ahead and get started here. First, I want to thank all of you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Long. I am the AAF program chair this year. And so as you know, today we're going to be hearing from Cade Martin, whom I've had the pleasure of getting to know a little bit more recently. And he's got a wonderful presentation coming up for us today. As some of you may have seen, Carrie had some awards, housekeeping announcements. She might throw those back out at the end of the presentation if you guys want to stick around for that. And then also, as you may have heard Carrie say, this is kind of meant to be an interactive presentation. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them during the presentation, or you can type them into the chat box, however you all feel most comfortable. So very quickly, originally from Richmond, Virginia, and based out of Washington, D.C., Cade Martin's work has taken him on assignment throughout the United States as well as abroad. Cade's photography focuses on people and locations, and clients include the Air Force, Amtrak, American Cancer Society, American Lung Association, the CDC, Department of Health and Human Services, Smithsonian, Starbucks, Target, NPR. The list goes on. So we're very, very lucky to have him come and talk to us today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Cade.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks, guys. Hey, I'm Cade. And yep, I'm a photographer, and I live in Washington, D.C. I grew up in Richmond. And I guess my origin story, my folks grew up in Bassett, Virginia. So I've spent plenty of times in Bassett, Roanoke, Martinsville, a lot of nights at the Hotel Roanoke, Mansion, O. Winston Link Museum in Roanoke. So I'm happy to be chatting with you guys. So, as we go, as Stephanie said, that, feel free to, chat, have, any questions as we go. I'm definitely not, a professional public speaker or anything like that. So I want to keep this as sort of normal and kind of free flowing as, we possibly can. And I have some images here that I want to share. And I created this probably I started working on this about a year before the pandemic. And, as we know, sort of before the pandemic, everybody was running around like the chicken with their head cut off. And, sort of nobody really had time, the days of yesteryear, I could sort of like call up and say, hey, can I come and show my portfolio to you? And, you'd sit down and, I'd sit across from the desk from you guys and, just really just have a free flowing conversation, as you flip through the portfolio, maybe you go through the first image, second image, third image, and, maybe you didn't care for it, maybe it doesn't interest you. And then all of a sudden it's like the fourth or fifth image, it's like, hey, this is kind of cool. Tell me a little bit more, about this image. And again, this was before the pandemic. And so I wanted to kind of create an online portfolio that was sort of interactive where, you could sort of scroll through, but you could also learn more if you cared to, So what we're seeing here is sort of kind of a sizzle reel, sort of a promo that I put together to sort of try to get interest in people sort of clicking on the interactive portfolio. So, once you go to my website, this would come up. And then you would hit sort of surprise me Cade, up here, and it would take you to this interactive portfolio, which you could click through. And, sort of back to my origin story, when I first started, I assisted, I went to Virginia Tech, I went to VCU. When I went to Virginia Tech, you're a kid, you have no idea what you want to do with the rest of your life. And you sort of blindfolded, you kind of throw that sort of dart at a dartboard. And I thought I was going to become an electrical engineer. So I went to Virginia Tech. And so I was at Blacksburg for about a year and a half. And great school, beautiful area. Wasn't really interested in engineering. It's kind of rudderless. I grew up in Richmond. My dad taught at VCU in the paint and printmaking department. So I kind of grew up in this community of sculptors, printmakers, a real sort of kind of creative community. As I was growing up, people were like, hey, are you going to do something creative, as when you get big, when you grow up? And I was like, no way. So I think that was my rebellion. I think if my dad were a doctor or a dentist, I might have got interested in photography a lot earlier. I never picked up a camera until I went back to VCU. I think it was my junior year of college. And just really started enjoying it. And I worked for a photographer in Richmond, was his full-time assistant for about a year and 10 months. I love Richmond. Knew I wanted to see something different. So I started going around and showing my portfolio. And one of my first projects, I got a project for National Geographic, chasing steam trains in, excuse me, in India. So for the next few years, I did sort of work that was sort of more reportage, journalistic, for National Geographic, for Discovery Channel, and that sort of stuff.
Yes.
Living in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of associations, it's sort of the market similar to, I would imagine Roanoke and Richmond, of course, a bigger market, but in DC, there's a range of projects, range of clients here. It ranges from sort of a mom and pop graphic designer working out of their basement to an association to, I do a lot of private school work. I do a lot of work for colleges, a lot of associations. In DC, there's a lot of PR firms. In DC, there's probably not that many advertising agencies, more probably in Baltimore and Richmond. I have to say that probably personal projects have sort of been at the wind of my sails, over the years. When I first started, you get sort of kind of frustrated. It's like, wow, you see these great visuals and it's like, I would love to do something like that. And of course, people aren't going to hire you for those projects unless they, see that you have the capabilities to do those projects and maybe to see those images, in your portfolio. So even to this day, I've been very aggressive and very ambitious about, my personal projects. And again, I think that's really been at the wind at my sails, sort of leading to, sort of the evolution of my work. And as you'll, see in, some of the images that I'll show you. But the great thing about, about being where we are is, every day, I'm doing something completely different. 2 weeks ago, I did a project for a new museum that just opened up in DC. Last week, I was in Tampa, Florida, for a project photographing wounded warriors. So photographing real, soldiers that have, gotten busted up and, have their issues. And so we were photographing these guys. 3 weeks ago, I was doing a corporate project for a retirement community here in town, and just photographing, portraits. Yesterday, I did a project for Apple, of all things, just doing portraits. So, it really kind of ranges, and that's what I really kind of get off on in my work, and sort of, I guess, just life, is that every day I'm someplace else, interacting with different projects, different folks. I do a lot of nonprofit work as well, and just having the ability to sort of get into these environments, and professionally, and making a living is one thing, but I don't know if any of you guys had read Tintin growing up, but Tintin is this sort of, there's 24 books in all, this little comic story about this guy, cub reporter, and his adventures with his dog Snowy. And every book, he's going to a different country, having a different adventure. And I've always wanted to live my life sort of just having a Tintin adventure. And as I've gotten older, I've really kind of realized that, the camera has really just been a vehicle. It's really been sort of the passport for me to have these sort of adventures. And, so many times it's, you get access to things behind the scenes. I think when I travel somewhere as a tourist, I'm kind of a lazy tourist, but, when you go for work, you go someplace and you get to go behind sort of the scenes, behind the curtain, and really kind of see how things are, really kind of work in the real world. And then also it's like you're with people from, that area, and it's like, hey, let's go to this little hootenanny restaurant. You go and it just looks like a complete dump from the side of the road. You maybe would not dare to venture if you were just cruising down the street on your own, but it's like, hey, this is really good. And it's just those little nooks and crannies of life that, I really enjoy. So I'm going to show a few images. And of course, if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask, jump in at any time. Pre-pandemic, I used to travel a whole bunch. I've gone to New Orleans a whole lot for work, Louisiana. This first image, I was there on a campaign for Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, who I do a lot of work for. And we go and we photograph, real people, real patients. You have to be sort of flexible and, I guess, empathetic for, these real life situations. And you could have a call with them 2 days before, and they're like, hey, this is great. And you get to the, location, and maybe they're feeling bad that day. And, you just have to be respectful of the situation. But, one night I went out with the location scout and to have a beer. And he was like, well, if you got in a car, you drove a half an hour, and then you got in a boat and go to another half an hour, you come to this little town that you can only get to by boat or plane. So I was like, I want to go. So we stayed an extra day. We hired sort of a Cajun waterman, and he took us out to this little place that you can only get to by boat and water. So it was just a really this is just really a love of the game image, just for myself. Just piggybacked on a travel job location that I was at, and a lot of times I keep these locations in my hip pocket. So in the future, if something comes up, for a real project, it's like, hey, what about this? What about this? So back to the interactive portfolio, just set it up, table of contents. As you go through here, you can click through, little story. This is a project I did for a decking company that was based in Chicago, and sort of just, I guess, talking about sort of problem solving, solution oriented. If something always comes up, for this particular project, it's like, hey, we want to photograph these decks. We want to have fantastical environments. So it's like, well, that's great. We'll travel, wherever the decks are. And I go, that's a great idea. And then a week later, they came and said, well, there's only one deck in Florida, and it just didn't have the dimensions of what we needed. And I was like, well, the decking company is your client. We'll get the decks and we'll build it in the studio. And they were like, that's a great idea. And then a week later, they called and they said, well, we only have 4 planks from each product. So it's like, well, what do we do? So we went to Chicago. They brought in these 4 planks. So in open ambient light, I photographed the planks so we could have the grain and the texture. And there's a CG guy that I work with that's in Amsterdam. And so, collaborated with him, and we built these decks. And, it has the texture and the grain and all that. And, it's really, it's all just, problem solving, this creative collaboration. A lot of times, you guys on your end, you worked on something for, 6 months, a year, a month before you even approach me. And, a lot of times I'm asked to sort of bring these sort of ideas, concepts to life. And, even at that point, it's always sort of, you hope that you're in sort of a safety nest of a conversation, a relationship where you can sort of just ping ideas back and forth. And, hopefully you don't sound like a complete idiot. And, say when we were chatting about this, fantastical environment, forest, and, I thought about the movie The Lord of the Rings, and I was like, well, how cool would it be if we had a Hobbit house? And in the back of my head, I was like, thinking they're going to like, what's Cade smoking? He's high, Hobbit house. And they're like, oh, we love that idea. So we wound up with like a little Hobbit house, in the background. So, it's just sort of, working through things, together, and, you throw something out there, and, maybe it's a good idea, maybe it works, sometimes it doesn't. So just, again, feeling like you're in the safety nest and being able to share the ideas. So here it is as well, other 2 images. These days, as you guys know, it's like content. So is it like a still shoot? It's like, if it's a still shoot, we want something moving. So, this image on the right was a still image, and then we've added little motion elements, cinematograph, that sort of thing. The doors will open and close. So, if you wanted to go down, sort of back into the spirit of maybe me not being there, and you're looking at this portfolio online, there's little calls to action that you can see more if you want to see more, hear more about the story. This was a project that I did in California. This was for Starbucks. They acquired Tazo Tea. We were out there 3, 4, 5 days photographing, and you scout and tech scout and say this particular image was all available light. We had a special effects and sort of smoked it up, and hey, we knew the sun was going to be coming through these trees at that direction, say 3 in the afternoon. So the whole day, schedule, and based on the optimum time of day of shooting. Same thing here. If you wanted to learn more, you can click on that box.
Hey, Cade.
Yep.
So when you're creating these, like that fantasy background that you had, you said you have a CG guy. So do you 2 kind of sit down and you're like, here's what I want this to look like, and he creates that for you? Or do you have a lot of experience with that and you can kind of create some of it? Or like, I guess, how does that work out? It seems like it's a very big part of what you do here. So
yeah,
just
it's a little bit of everything, for these, these conceptual images, such as this timber tack, say like right now we're estimating for another project. And so, the client, has come to us, and, they have their concept, they have their mood board, they have sketches of, what's they want, what's been improved by their client. So, I guess it was a similar type thing here. And, a lot of times, the comps were just completely Frankenstein on any inspiration, the agency and the client, found and put together. And so, our sort of job is to bring that to life, but to also improve on that. So, hey, say, Stephanie, you came to me and you had the sketch, and then it's like, okay, green light, ready to go. Fed and I would sort of disappear in the back cave for a few days, and he and I would work together on sketches and sort of placement of things, and then of course we would show it with you guys, and then it's like, hey, we like this, or we don't like that, or we like that, or we hate this, and once we start getting that sort of approval, we'll start building these images, and it could be say for these were fantastical where it really doesn't exist in real life, the backgrounds. It could be a mixture of stock photography and CG. The great thing about stock photography is that, it really has, sort of the texture, of photography. It is photography, sometimes with CG, it's so good these days, it's getting better and better and better, but, sometimes it still has sort of kind of a coldness to it. So, say for this particular project, everything on the deck, we really photographed, with the exception of that little leopard tiger. Like the poodle was there, but all the props and everything were there. So, we would go in, the CG guy and I, we would build these environments, and it's super important to establish where the lighting is. Say this image on the left, it's like, okay, sunlight's coming from, say, 10 o'clock. So when we go into the studio, I light everything from the absolute same direction that we've built this environment in. So it doesn't feel illustrational. So when we sort of go the retouching process, everything is seamlessly integrated as possible. Also for something like this, there's a ton of math to consider, because we're building these scenes in 3D, certain lenses, certain perspectives, and I'm just spitballing, but it's like, hey, this is a 35 millimeter lens, the camera is 2 feet from the ground. So when we go to the studio, I'm photographing these people with the exact lens and cameras from the exact same height from the ground as we built these environments. Subject is, say the 15 feet or whatever, the same distance that from lens to camera is, we built it in the computer. For people position, a lot of times we'll just use, CG people, which looks like an alien or something, but, it just gives us placement perspective and all that. So hopefully that helps. But, you get to this stuff and, these are all real world environments. So, you go here and, this allows you to build whatever your imagination will allow, jumping whale or flying Eiffel Tower, etc. But then this stuff, you just scout, and you find, real world locations. And, just sort of, back to sort of, where I started from, say the geographic stuff, I would get hired and people would trust that they could send me off by myself. And, I would go into these places sight unseen and be able to kind of create images. And so that sort of experiences, I think, really helped me, over the years, because, of course, these are all collaborations with people, on the ground and that sort of stuff. But, you get really kind of comfortable going and you kind of comfortable with sort of the unfamiliar and kind of creating things. A lot of the nonprofit stuff I do, I've been doing this campaign. I'll show you guys some images in a little bit, but, it's people that have disabilities in this one company there in Vienna, Virginia, provide employment for folks with disabilities. And so we go into these factories, a lot of military bases, and, we've never scouted. I walk into the place, it's the first time I saw it, and you just walk around and, it's just a visual scavenger hunt, just crawling around and you're just making images. And, I've over the years, say DC and reports, all this stuff, I photograph real people more than I do models. And so I think I sort of have a, sort of a little bit of ability to get people sort of comfortable in a short amount of time, people that, aren't used to having their photo taken, people that necessarily don't like their photo taken. And so yesterday we did this thing and I think I had 8 minutes total. I had 3 minutes for a portrait and then 5 minutes with this person walking outside, and they walked in sight unseen. And so I had 8 minutes total to do all this stuff. And so, sort of you have to get people comfortable, you have to be comfortable with yourself and, all these people around, and just sort of, being able to create in sort of a short amount of time. And, that time frame isn't always, dictated, but anyway, this is all location stuff. So finding locations that, work for the project. And here, they just come with mood boards, and then, you're tasked to, find these places. And it's not me all the time finding these places. You work with a location scout, et cetera, depending on the project. But, say an editorial, what I was doing yesterday, I was asked to, I went the day before, scouted around, looked for locations. And so it's all different depending on the project. Say, this is Savannah. I did a tourism campaign here, and, they wanted to show, Savannah down in Georgia. Same thing here, if you want to learn more. But, here I went down probably a month before, scouted locations, and, looking for, textures, storytelling. They really wanted to sort of get off the beaten path of a lot of what had been shown in Savannah. And, it's all a collaboration with, the client, the agency, and, found the locations. And then it's like, hey, we had a 2-person bike. Hey, can we do a 3-person bike? Is it possible for a 4-person bike? And then it's like, hey, Mary Poppins, we wanted this little girl sort of floating away. And so everybody was, really here, where the Timber Tech, that was sort of Frankenstein in the studio, hear people, really here. And so had like little scaffolding for this little girl, so she could get up on her tippy toes and, sort of have this act where she was floating away. But, with her feet, it just didn't really feel like, she had that sort of effortless floating. And so I had a ballet bar there as well. So we did the upper sort of 2/3 of her body, stand on the scaffolding. And then we brought in this ballet bar, and then she just pushed up on it. And so that way her legs were hanging. And so she could just kind of create different shapes with her legs. And then that way, we just sort of composited it in. And so it really felt like that kind of weightless feeling. So,
this campaign really leverages our current campaign, which is rooted in the authentic representation of Savannah. We're sort of using the authentic locations that you'll see throughout the campaign.
And, projects these days that I'm on, it's like, hey, is the stills, is that leading it? And then we have to do a little bit of motion, or is it a video shoot? And then I'm asked to come in as the still photographer. And, it's all good. And it's, project to project, it's all completely different. And, as the still guy on video projects, a lot of times it's like, I have to sit around 6-7 hours. And then it's like, okay, still guy, that's usually what they call me. Still guy, here's your 5 minutes or 3 minutes, and you just jump in and, work as quickly as you can. But, say this is a book project I did for a ballet company. And, say this image is on the left is what was planned on. And then we got to the set, and we were sitting there, and I looked over, and the assistant was they were setting up, and they had a bunch of balloons, and all I could see was their feet. And I thought of that movie, The Red Balloon. I was like, how cool would it be if they just floated off? So we did this shot on the right. We spent about 8 minutes total on that, but it wasn't even planned on. So it's so many times, you get, you could talk out of the wazoo on conference calls or whatever, but you get to the real location, and maybe you see something different, or something changes, and you just have to sort of kind of deal with it and be flexible, and just figure things out. But personal projects, again, I would do a lot of association work. I was doing a project for the Melanoma Foundation, and I was talking to this woman at lunch, and she was just talking about tattoos and the damage they do to skin. And then in the same breath, she was like, hey, are you going to go to the tattoo festival next week? And I was like, oh, I didn't know anything about it. Sounds fun. So we called up, and we got exhibit space, and then I set up a photo booth, and I just grabbed people off the floor that were walking around that I thought had a good look. So completely sort of a captive audience, sort of love of the game personal project. And it happened so quick, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I photographed everybody against gray, and then went in and sampled their torso. So everybody has their own personal tapestry backdrop based on their own tattoo. So same here, we did a little BTS video.
If you want trouble, you got it. Ooh.
those guys were there. They were with their friends or family or whoever. Some of them were exhibiting it. So you're respectful of, who they are and how much time they have. And it's like, hey, I love your look. Can I borrow you for like 3 minutes, 5 minutes at most? And, some people would be interested, other people weren't. And, of course, again, they were there for this event, so you didn't want to, burn their time. So you just sort of work as quickly as you can. This is the photographer, William Eigelston. This is a personal project that I did, photographed him in Memphis. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but sort of he's kind of known as the father of color photography, super famous for this body of work that he did in the late 60s and 70s. So he's quite the character. And, I could tell the story if we were in person or here, but, say if you wanted to learn more, you could, hit that and it would tell you sort of the story about my adventure. Here I did a water conservation project in Las Vegas. I grew up on the Lone Ranger and Zorro and all those guys, and just loved every second of them. And I knew this guy was coming, but for whatever reason, I was looking the other way, and he all of a sudden my spidey sense goes off, and I turn, and he was standing behind me wearing this outfit, and I went up, and I was like, wow, and I was like, of course we had the task at hand, but I was like, well, do you have other friends that I can come photograph? And he was based out of LA, and he was like, yeah, sure. So after I did this project, a couple months later, I went out to LA and photographed a bunch of his buddies, and it was just for myself, just personal project. So big comic book out there. And so I always wanted to do a comic book portrait project. Now, I just didn't know how I was going to do it or how I was going to approach it. And I did an editorial project for Washingtonian magazine. I got hired to go photograph Civil War reenactors down in Spotsylvania. And so they wanted them stripped of their environment. So we had like this battlefield, and I built this tent. And then I just grabbed these people when they had a chance and brought them into this tent. So then I had this sort of aha moment. It was like, man, I could do that with comic book guys. So I started hanging out at the Comic Cons. And this was really the first sort of captive audience project that I did. And same thing, rented exhibit space, set up a photo booth, and just grab people that were walking by. And, it's sort of, I don't know, you just can't make this stuff up. I mean, this Batman guy here, he was there for 3 consecutive days, and every day he was wearing a different Air Batman outfit. Somebody dresses their kid up or paints their kid as Baby Hulk. And so, it's sort of like a real collaboration and not even knowing it, because these guys, spend like 6 months a year making their outfits. And so, but it's funny because a lot of these things you have to play politics, because, say Robin here, say she was walking down, with all her friends, and maybe there's 4 or 5 of her buddies with her. And I really only wanted to get to her, but you just have to be nice, and you have to photograph everybody just to kind of get to her. So it's all good. I do a lot of theater stuff. This is a project I did for the Kennedy Center. This image on the right is a real guy. For about 20 years, I've heard about these 2 wolf boys in Mexico. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine who's from Mexico City, we spent Thanksgiving together, and we got on Facebook, and we found this guy, and he was outside of Tulum at a circus, and we sent him a note. He was like, sure, come on down. So we went down, just totally for me. And he has this condition where it's just overgrowth of hair on his face, and the rest of his body is, just like you and I. And he has 2 little girls, and they're wolf girls. He was talking about growing up in this little village in Mexico. His whole family was wolf people. And, everybody in the village thought they were just like the devil, just thought they were Satan. And, they were like killing their cats and their dogs, and just nuts. So anyway, this is just, again, just love of the game project, just to, have this, experience with this fellow. This is Clarksdale, Mississippi, Juke Joint Festival. I was there, personal project. Just got an outdoor space and just grabbed people that were walking around. So much of what we do is play dress up and make believe, but you can't make this stuff up. How people just sort of decide to dress for the day. Like this guy has this little, collar out, and I just love it. This is a project I did for PBS. They liked my portraits, and so this is the series Mercy Street. So we got hired to photograph the actors. So we went down to Petersburg, Virginia, and set up a studio in a high school gym there, just photographed actors. Actually, it's the same high school that Moses Malone had gone to school there. Another personal project, these are Vietnam fighter pilots. Went to San Antonio, they had a little get together. These are F-105 fighter pilots. And I just rented a room next to their space and just sort of just grab people, you know, whenever I could. And of course, you know, be respectful of them wanting to hang out with their buddies and, you know, fellow soldiers and pilots. And over the years, you know, people have asked me about the comic book guys and the blues guys or whatever, and they asked me if I got their stories. And, you know, again, I was always trying to be respectful, and, you know, I really didn't want to burn their time. And this project, I got their stories, but after I photographed them, we got their information. And over the next year after I did this, we got their information and sort of put together a real nice sort of promo. And you could see the story here if you choose. But when we sent it out, it was just amazing because it was really getting pinged in the military community. And, you know, I just wanted to make honest portraits, and I wanted to have like the light dramatic enough where it just showed like the life lived and the lines of their faces. And again, I mean, you can't make any of this junk up. I mean, this guy with his mustache, I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. I mean, this guy who just recently passed away last year, I mean, showed up with his Band-Aid on his forehead. And we sent this out, and it was getting really pinged in the military community. And somebody emailed me, and this guy, about this guy in particular, his name's John Morrissey. And the guy that emailed me, I could almost hear him crying in this email. He goes, I just received this email. John Morrissey was my roommate in college for a year and a half. In Vietnam, I was in this town. I said, hey, has anybody seen John? And whoever he was talking to said John had been shot down. So he thought his college roommate had been dead all this time until somebody had sent him this email. And I asked, like, well, would you like his contact information? He goes, yes. And then like a week later, he emailed me back and he goes, well, we're getting together. And he goes, you made this possible. And I don't know if that's true, but, you know, if nothing else comes from this project, you know, just that little story is just, yeah, just amazing. I do a lot of work for Smithsonian, museum objects. There's really never any kind of budget, but I absolutely love going down there. You just get to interact with their objects. This is C-3PO from the third original Star Wars movie. And, you know, sometimes, you know, on these projects, again, you know, it's like no budget, and I'm really doing it for myself. And then, but it's still at the back of your head, and it's like, well, you know, I'm spending a little bit of money, I'm investing in this. Why am I really doing it? And then somebody called me from an agency in LA, and they were doing something for Target for photographing Star Wars toys for one of the Star Wars movies. So I had that body of work from just a love of the game project. And then, you know, I got sort of, I guess, a paying job, a real job, which is kind of cool. Video stuff, do a lot of theater stuff. In DC, you know, there's a lot of theater. And so we make these sort of one sheets, you know, sort of film movie posters. Working with actors, I love working with actors much more than models. You know, this woman actually was on one of these shows, CSI, Miami or something, but she was doing this local theater. And, you know, I just almost felt guilty because I just set up the camera, and then, you know, every time I clicked it, she just gave some sort of amazing, you know, expression. So, you know, it's really that sort of kind of, I don't know, collaboration, and let people just do their thing. This was not on my wish list of things that I wanted to do in life, but somehow I got asked to photograph some stamps. And we did this. Like, these were released last year, these hip hop stamps. And it was the interest. I'm not a real stamp guy, I'm more of a superhero guy, but this guy had designed these stamps of Star Trek stuff. And they were just gorgeous, just little icon Star Trek stuff. And I just wrote the guy a note, and I was like, hey, I just wanted to let you know, these stamps that you designed are really beautiful. And he sent me back a note, said, hey, thank you, Cade. And that was it. And then 3 years later, he emailed me saying, hey, I have this stamp project and needs photography, you know, would you be interested? So that sort of kind of came from that. This is a personal project that I did back in New Orleans. I kept passing this power plant that was built like in 1905. It's been sitting empty since 1970. So I got access and I photographed it. But then I got with a painter that works for Pixar, who lives in San Francisco, and I made big prints, sent it to him, and I've never met the guy. We've never met in person, and he painted over top of my images. And it was just sort of this kind of collaboration with somebody that you'd never even met. And it was sort of, I did my thing and then he did his thing. And we were going to have a show in New Orleans right before all this COVID stuff. And so this has just been kind of sitting around. I haven't released this yet, but we have big, huge prints that are kind of cool. Back to Louisiana. There's a comic strip in the late 50s, Pogo. And it's about this little alligator and all his adventures with his buddies in the bayou. And there's also the Cajun Night Before Christmas. So I wanted to do a personal project inspired, these little alligator critters, having fun with all their buddies. So just the love of the game project. And then again, you're in the back of your head, it's like, oh gosh, I'm kind of spending some money doing this. Why am I doing it? And then somebody saw it. It was a big CG convention somewhere on the West Coast. And I think this image here, they blew it up and put it on the side of the building for the convention, which was kind of cool. I don't think I got paid for it. I got credit. So personal projects. Here's a table of contents. And then I'll show you guys this. And, it's sort of just reality. It's sort of like, I want to be completely honest. It's sort of, I've done some cool stuff but for every one of these type shots, I do probably 10 of these, something that's, really conceptual. This was a ballet project for a ballet company in DC, and it was no budget. Everybody sort of just pitched in, and everybody was kind of working for free. And so you look at it and the production value seems a lot. But we really kind of did it on a shoestring budget. But, again, for every one of those, I do a lot of portrait stuff, and it's just sort of getting in, a real person. Photograph this guy. He's a president of SHRM, Society of Human Resource Management. He has a book coming out, just needed a new portrait. So, just get in and you just kind of poke at people. These were just portraits, headshots of, people at law firms, sort of just profile pics. And you just kind of try to go out of your way to, try to make it not look like a corporate, headshot if you can just kind of play off personality, that sort of thing. This is what I mentioned earlier. This is this company, Source America. And so this was in Washington State. And so, they hire me, and it's kind of like, back to the visual scavenging hunt. I just go up and, I just pulled up my car, and this was the guy I was supposed to photograph. I'd never seen him before in my life. And, he was out there working. And so, you just do the best that you can, and sort of hopefully make the best portrait that you can. Same thing. These guys disabled, and disabilities range from folks that such as this guy who may have an invisible disability to something such as this, and you just go in and just try to do the best by these people as you can. You just kind of poke at people. This guy was like super shy, and I don't know what I was poking at him about. Maybe he was from Chicago. I was making fun of bears or something. So I do a lot of association nonprofit. This is a portrait I did for March of Dimes. So back to this, this was a thing that we did down for a flooring campaign in Atlanta, Georgia, conceptual look, that sort of thing. But, again, for every one of those, I do this type of work, which I just love. I mean, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, you just go, and this was in Atlanta, you just showed up at this park, and you just try to figure out, are you there for a portrait or whatever? And somebody had some balloons, and you see this little kid, and it's like, well, I'm going to just run with you for a little bit. It's just sort of just trying to capture images. Cystic fibrosis, this little girl and her dog. And cystic fibrosis, somebody and one of their little buddies. Same thing, cystic fibrosis. I do a lot of retirement living projects. This was in Annapolis, Maryland. You just go and just available light. This is a farm, Middleburg, Virginia. Retirement living. Do a lot of work, school stuff. This was for a college. This is Peabody Library that's in Baltimore. Retirement living. So it's just simple. You just go and just play off the light, available light, try to find things that you can kind of shoot through. And, she's not a model. She was just a real resident who's not used to having her photo taken. And, all this stuff, budgets are all over the place. It's like, I could work for the same guy. And there's this one guy I've been working for 20 years, and he'll call up and say, hey, Cade, I got an okay budget. And the next time it's like, I have no budget. And then it's like, it's like, hey, we got a decent budget for this. And, it all works out. This is a portrait I did of an author recently. She saw some of my work and it was just available. She had like $500 total. And it was like, went around town and just did little photos of her just for a book cover. Smithsonian. This was for Norfolk Southern Railway, and this was a support for the arts project. So nonprofit, to support the arts, not much of a budget. Northern Southern Railway is their logo is a horse, so we had to incorporate a horse in there somehow. Hospital stuff. There's a campaign for MRI machines. Back to this image you've seen here, but again, for every one of those, I do probably 10 of these.
Hey, Cade, someone asked what your go-to lens is.
It's funny. It's I don't know if I have a go-to lens. It's one of those funny things. It's sometimes you get asked that, you go, wow, that's a really cool picture. It's like, what kind of camera do you use? And then in your head you're like, well, do you ask like a writer, like what type of like typewriter they use? Sort of. But like a lens, like for something like this, is sort of like a longer lens, which can throw the background out of focus. Where here, you could focus on the person and the background is there to complement them, but it's not in focus where it competes visually with all the folks. So that was probably a long lens. This is sort of a wider lens here. And, so, like the stucco and the grain on the wall, here's a longer lens where I could, again, isolate the subject, where the background is there to support his story. But, if that was all in focus back there, I think visually we would sort of start competing with him. It really kind of isolates. This is a wide lens here. But I guess, part of that lensing is sort of like the aperture. So you could get, say this is a wide lens, but you'd like have it wide open where the focus stays on the hero and then the background, kind of blows out. So it really kind of depends on what you're doing and what you need. Yesterday I did a portrait, so it was a longer lens and I had to run outside. So it was a wider lens. So it really kind of depends on the ask. And the spaces, this is a lifestyle. This is a real bedroom, bathroom. So just walked in. And so I was probably like a 24mm lens, like super wide. This whole bathroom was probably like 6 feet in length. This was probably like a wide lens, and this was a wide lens as well. But it's just little moments, you just get in and, say photographing this little girl and, her mom is there. This was CFF as well. And, maybe she's like nervous or shy or whatever. And then you get the mom, it's like, hey, come over here and play Tickle Monster. And so she's out of frame and I kind of get her to reach in and like give her a little tickle on, the side to get her like cracking up and laughing. Just try to capture like a little moment. CFF as well. This is in Louisiana. This is a project we did for Fannie Mae. Retirement living. So I'm really kind of industry agnostic as far as, the work, which I really like. I just love the range of experiences that I have. Every day, you're kind of doing something different spot. You could be in a studio for something like this. This was for like my eye doctor. This was for Fannie Mae in an apartment. This was Fannie Mae outside. And so, you get there and you're just trying to find a shot and it's like you just walk out and it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. Retirement living.
So I have a quick question for you. Do you feel like you always had an eye for photography, or is it something you kind of helped develop as a skill set over the years?
Yeah, I'm sure. I guess it's gotten, you know, it's evolved over the years. It's got better or worse. I'm not quite sure. But it's sort of funny because, again, talking about, how I grew up, I grew up in this sort of community of, creative folks and my dad. And so I think by sort of osmosis, I had sort of a visual education sort of growing up. I'm an only child. My folks dragged me to the movie theater a whole bunch. And even to this day, I love going to the movies. And I'm much more inspired by going to the movies than I am, I collect photo books and such, but I much rather, go look at movies. And, you just see how things are composed, you see how things are lit. But yeah, I think, when I started, again, I didn't start until probably junior year of college. And, I felt kind of off the bat that I was sort of, I was able to separate myself a little bit from, other folks in my class a little bit. And I think, again, that was just sort of my upbringing with my folks about, how things are sort of composed and, my folks and their friends. But, over the years, as you mature, yeah, I think so. And then also, I think a lot of it has to do with, interaction too, because, say this was, just a portrait, just a real guy as an architect guy. And I don't know if they use this shot or not, but, you just get in and you just have fun. You just play a little music and, you just try to make it sort of as normal and fresh as you can. And, just poke at people. And he had this great laugh. And so, yeah, it's funny because I was chatting with this gentleman this morning about this project we just did yesterday, and he was like, "Well, that was fairly straightforward. Did you think that was easy?" And I had to think about it. I guess I don't want to say easy, but it's like the experiences that you have. It's like, well, technically, I guess I know what I'm doing, and I guess I'm comfortable in my skin, and I'm comfortable around people and be able to work under pressure, and I'm comfortable being able to make people emote in a short amount of time. So I was telling him, I was almost laughing that it's like, well, I'm trying to sort of be easier on myself these days, because X number of years ago, I might have been like, well, anybody could have done that. But, it's like, I don't know if they could, so it's like, again, I had 8 minutes to do like these 2 setups, and, a lot of people could. And I'm not saying I'm special or super special, but I think, I had the ability to sort of kind of get in and, sort of block all this other stuff that was going on and sort of kind of focus sort of the task at hand. But to answer your question, long-winded, yeah, I think, sort of compositionally and technically, yeah, I think I'm as strong now as I'm stronger now as I've ever been. And I just think that just comes with, maturing experience. And so this was like a retirement thing that we did in Annapolis. And it was like that day of, it's like, well, let me just run around the block and look for some locations. And then, it's like, oh, this is kind of cool. You guys stay here for a second. I got to go check out something. Then it's like, well, that looks good. Okay, everybody kind of run over. Again, just portrait stuff, corporate portraits. So yeah, so that's some of my stuff.
Do you think that you've had the success that you've had because of those side passion projects that you did for, I would say for free, but obviously it was worse than that. You were paying to go and do these things. But do you think that's kind of what gave you your success?
I don't necessarily think it's given me my success. I think it's definitely helped sort of take my career elsewhere. It's helped me sort of evolve sort of professionally. It was pretty much kind of right out the hatch, I started getting work, I was very aggressive about showing my portfolio, and it was a lot of sort of, I don't say more normal stuff, but it's people, portraits, and that sort of thing. And, I was sort of knew that I wanted to sort of try to stretch myself, expand, I guess my capabilities. And so, I started, doing that personal stuff, which led to, I guess, say bigger production stuff or more conceptual work, or maybe those sometimes go together. So looking back, I certainly think I was a success before I started getting those sort of conceptual type projects. And I don't know, I guess that's a personal sort of thing about, what do you consider success and that sort of thing. And, I've always been sort of my own worst critic, sort of just pushing. But, I guess as you kind of look back a little bit, it's like, well, I was doing okay then, and so I think I was a success before, and I think I'm a success now, but I think those personal projects have helped my sort of growth as far as my imagery, if that makes any sense.
We've got a few students on the call with us today. Is there any advice you would go back and give your college self if you wanted to pursue this career and didn't know what you know now?
Well, I guess it's really kind of belief in self. So many times, you're self-critical or you're sort of insecure about your work and, having the confidence to sort of go show it. And, when I first started, I assisted folks, and that was a great education. You would learn things, what to do, but sometimes you'd also learn what not to do. And, there was this one photographer that I worked with, and, every time he went for a portfolio meeting, he was always like, oh my gosh, what do I show? I don't know what to show. And it was almost like second guessing himself. And I was thinking, it's like, well, just show the work that you want to do. But I didn't say that because, I was just a kid. And then when I was thinking, it's like, well, when I'm going to go out on my own, I'm going to just show the work that I want to do. And I remember working or going to show my portfolio to this one guy. And a couple of minutes ago, I mentioned this guy I've been working with for 20 years. And, he'll come and say he'll have a normal budget or no budget. Same guy. First time I went to see him, it was for a corporate portrait project. And so in my portfolio, I had corporate portrait stuff. But then I had like stuff from India, National Geographic, all this other kind of weird stuff. And then he was like, well, he goes, well, you're going to have to go meet the client. But I would say, don't show him this stuff. Just show him the corporate stuff. And so I go, okay. And then I left. And then I was thinking in my head, it's like, well, God, am I going to sell out that early? I'm going to just go show the work I want to show. So I went and met with the folks and I showed them the corporate stuff, the type of project images that they were going to hire me for. But I also showed them my other body of work, the stuff that I was really passionate about. And they were so excited. They were like, wow, this is amazing. They go, Cade, nobody ever shows us this type of work. So does that work all the time? I don't know. But, I guess it's sort of just belief in self, confidence, just like, you show your work to 10 different people, maybe 5 will like it, maybe 4 will like it. There's certainly going to be people that, don't have the same aesthetics or taste or that sort of stuff. So I think you have to believe in yourself. One piece of advice I'd give, and that's really these days, I guess, I don't know if I'd give it, maybe my younger self, maybe, but it hasn't affected my generation as much as I think the younger. It's like these days, it's like stills, video. There's so much more video work, it seems, these days. And I would say really kind of get versed in both creating stills and video, get versed in working with strobes for stills and continuous lights for video. Of course, you can shoot both stills and video under continuous lights, but just having that sort of that in your toolbox, that ammunition on your back, I think is really going to kind of help you because it just seems like these days, everything, Instagram stories, will it go back? I'm not sure, but everybody wants to see, a lot of people want to see something moving, it could even be a portrait, you get into the elevator kiosk and there's little monitors as you go in the elevator, and it could be just a portrait of, somebody just like looking up or looking away. You go check in at the airport and there's like those big long horizontals. And it's just like little snippets, somebody on a beach just throwing, a shawl over their shoulders. And so it's almost just little moving portraits, not like a full-fledged movie or a full-fledged video. But I just see that coming more and more.
All right, well, we're getting close to the end here. Was there anyone else who had any questions? If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can type it in the chat here.
Yeah, or feel free to email me too at any time. That's cool. That'd be completely cool.
I can share Cade's email in the comments here. Give me a quick second.
And while Stephanie's providing his email address, if you want to reach out to Cade with any other questions or comments, his website link is also in the chat window. So make sure to go check that out. And Cade, just a huge thank you from AAF Roanoke for coming and sharing your work with us today. I mean, it's really inspiring seeing all these visuals and the thought process and the inspiration that goes into them. We really appreciate you spending a little time with us today to show us all of your work.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you guys having me. Yeah, very much appreciated. I know there's a lot of images in there. And so, yeah, I appreciate you guys listening and taking a peek.
And just to wrap up everybody today, one more call for entries for the AAF Awards. The awards are for the best of work that was produced by creatives in the Roanoke region and the New River Valley in 2021. So that's anything that was published in this calendar year up through December 31st. Student entries are open. The deadline for student entries is Friday, January 14th. Professional entries are also open, and those are open through Friday, January 7th. If you have questions about awards and want to see the download guide so you can see the hundreds of categories available, there's something for every creative in there. You can find it all at aafroanoke.org/awards, and it'll take you to the entry portal and give you the entry guide. And that's the last of my announcements. Stephanie, do you have anything else to close out the day?
I do not. I just want to thank Cade so much for taking some time to show us your work. It was really, really awesome. And thank everyone for joining us, and just kind of stay tuned for more programs and socials throughout the year. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. And once again, thank you, Cade. We appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take
Happy
care.
holiday.